You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And the season's over, but we still have to recap the Pittsburgh Steelers 2020 season. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward. Welcome to the Renegade Blitz. And we have Nick Farabaugh, Steelers writer for Pittsburgh Sports Now, with us to talk about the Steelers season that was. And Nick, we're glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me on, guys. It's an honor. I'm really excited to talk about a lot of topics. Obviously, season didn't end as we wanted it to, Steelers fans. But, you know, next phase, offseason, is probably the most important offseason we've had in a long time.
Absolutely. 20 unrestricted free agents for the Steelers, so many futures to be cited, so little money, so little time, I guess you could say that. But first, we want to get your thoughts on this 2020 season. It had a lot of great moments, an 11-0 start. Really, the Steelers, trademark Steelers losses were shifted into one end of the schedule. In the end, it ended the season for them. So
bittersweet, right? I mean, the 11-0 run, that's some of the best stuff you felt as a Steelers fan since you won the Super Bowl over a decade ago. But that end of the season, that was pretty sad, honestly, on all fronts. Ben didn't play well. The defense kind of fell apart because of so many injuries. Everything just kind of fell apart, right? So overall, a disappointing season. I mean, started out 11-0. Then you start to see the signs. Ben, probably father time's coming up on Ben a little bit. Fichtner is in disarray. The defense is so injured. You just kind of felt hopeless at the end of the year. And, you know, that Colts game gave you one last spark. Maybe this team had something, and they played decently with Mason Rudolph against Cleveland week 17, but overall disappointing. I mean, you just start out 11-0 and lose in the wild card round, go 1 of 5 to end the season. That's kind of just how you have to feel. It's a disappointing season. This was their year to win the Super Bowl, to really maximize it, and they just didn't do it.
Going off, quarterback, what do you see with Ben's future, especially now that Randy's out? They let him go. They just, they started off really well, scoring, 24 points or more, I think, was in their first 11 games, and then they just, like you mentioned, they just completely fell off down the stretch. So do you think Ben will come back next year?
Yeah, I think he will. I know there are reports, if I think he's back. First of all, I hate to use this as a reason, but the money talks, right? There's a lot of money for Ben to be made, $19 million to be exact. It's a lot of money. I know he's made a lot in his career, but he's got a lot of money that he can still make out there. 2, I don't think he thinks personally he's done. Like, I think thinks he can still play. So yeah, I think he'll be back. The question is, for me, is how deteriorated is he going to look, right? Because I don't think his arm is gone. Like, I know a lot of people think his arm's gone. I think it's the knees. Like, he's talked about it. He has arthritic knees. He can't really step into throws anymore. So it looks like the arm's gone. I think the arm is fine, but it's tough for me to see Ben taking, a giant leap forward. We'll talk about this later, kind of with what they need to do to make this offense work for Ben next year. Ben personally right now, I think he can still play to a degree. I just don't think he can do what he did, in 2010 and say, have all this around him that's bad, a bad O-line, whatever, and just, overcome it. He's just not that elite QB anymore.
Well, there's one thing, of course. Now Randy Fichtner is officially gone as the Steelers offensive coordinator. The next question is, well, who will replace him? There's a lot of talk of Matt Canada being upgraded from OC, from quarterback coach. Me personally, I don't think you'd want to go into the organization right now, even if the guy's been there for 1 year and it felt like he was a placeholder for the future. Have you been seeing guys around the league? For me, being a Steel Valley graduate, anytime that I heard Luke Getsy's name being around as offensive coordinator, he works as the passing game guy out in Green Bay. He'd be another guy, but there's a couple other guys you could go with. Bevel was the acting head coach for the Lions. He probably won't be brought back into that staff. And of course, if you want to stick around with the Seattle guys, a lot of guys have been saying Brian Schottenheimer because he allowed Russell Wilson to throw 40 touchdowns this year, but he did taper off towards the end of the season. and is just like us out in the wild card round.
So OC, tough discussion, right? Good thing Fichtner's gone. So here's the thing with Canada and why even though I agree with you that we need to go outside the organization, I think he's still a candidate. The Steelers under Kevin Colbert, 4 of their 5 OCs have been internally elevated. The 5th one was Todd Haley. He's from Upper St. Clair, and his dad used to work for the Steelers. So really 5 internal candidates, right? So are they going to buck that trend? I mean, this is as good of a time to do it as ever. Ben's on his way out the door in the next year or two. You're going to have that reset. So then you want, for me, I personally would want a guy that's known for developing young quarterbacks, that's known for developing a system that's tailored to quarterbacks that he can make an adjustment on the fly. I would love for our next OC to get poached away for a head coaching job. I would love to see that. I mean, because that means you have a really good OC. You have a really good OC, whether it's for 2 seasons, 1 season, I don't care. I like Getsy a lot. I think that's a strong candidate. He kind of brings that. If you want that young mold, you have Mike Kafka from Chiefs. He's their QB's coach. That anyone from that Reed system usually ends up pretty good as an offensive coordinator. That's a strong candidate. One guy, Pep Hamilton, I really like him. Chargers QB coach. He just is known for working with those young quarterbacks, right? Justin Herbert did really well with him this year. Andrew Luck had a lot of success with him. He has experience as an OC, so you still have the experience factor. I really like him. But my favorite candidate for the job, because I don't think they're going to hire, especially after Mike McDaniel is reportedly getting the OC elevation to Shanahan system. I think he's out the door. I like Aaron Cromer, the Rams run game coordinator. Why? You kind of get a little bit of everything. He's been in coaching for 3 decades, so you have the experience factor. He's worked with Tomlin in the past. He brings that McVay offense, that wide zone stuff, that modern running game, and you really want to fix the running game. That can be a big time factor too. He kind of just checks all the boxes. So I personally favor Aaron Cromer. But if you want, those are my favorite candidates. But if you want to go with guys who could be, Jay Gruden, I think is another possibility. Jags OC, there's a lot of connections there. Anthony Lynn is another possibility. I know that's really talked about. Former Chargers head coach. I think if you want to fix the run game, he's another candidate that can really make sense. There's a lot of candidates across the board. I don't know where they're going to go. I give Canada as a light favorite, but this one could go any direction right now.
Offensive line, which is you could dive into this, really well. I mean, it was a lot of struggles this year, and Shaun Sarrett was let go, which was a little surprising to me because when he was first hired, a lot of people held him into high regard. They said he's a real hard worker, and they thought he would be the next he was a prodigy to Mike Munchak. So what were your thoughts on the offensive line this year, which was a real head scratcher, really?
Across the board, bad. They looked old, to say the least. They looked like an old offensive line. Dotson looked like he was the best offensive lineman by far. No exaggeration. He should have been a starter. I still don't understand why they benched him over Filer. Filer is interesting because he's not really old. He was really good at right tackle last year, arguably the Steelers' best lineman last year. And then he kind of just fell off a cliff. I don't exactly know if he's more comfortable on the right side or if because his body makeup doesn't make sense to be a great tackle, right? He's not super long. He's not a super powerful dude. He's just steady. Last year, that's kind of what he did. He kind of was just a steady guy that was really good in pass pro, got a little bit of movement, and it was good. I don't know what happened to him. Villanueva, I know he gets a lot of flack. He's fine. He's better in pass protection than people will admit, but he definitely gets beat a lot. And then Pouncey to Castro are just on their last legs. Pouncey can't snap accurately whatsoever. I don't know what's up with that. And DeCastro just looked beaten up all year. He could bounce back. He's a candidate to bounce back. Wouldn't surprise me if he comes back next year. David DeCastro's back. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know what's happening there. Chuks Okorafor started off really well. I thought he was pretty bad at the end of the year, though. That's a work in progress. He came into the league pretty raw, but he's got great athletic tools. So I'm not ready to give up on Chooks yet. And I think you can pencil in him as a starter, whether it's at left tackle or right tackle next year. The O-line in general was just bad. They didn't get a lot of movement in the run game. They did do well in pass pro, but they didn't give up sacks, but the pockets kept collapsing around Ben. And Ben, what can Ben do when there's a pocket collapsing around? He gets it out in 2.5 seconds. The O-line was easily, in my opinion, the second worst group on the team this year. Worst being the running backs, but the whole running game in general was just a disaster.
I want to ask one thing. You mentioned that Okorafor could be, you said left tackle or right tackle. Do you believe that Alejandro Villanueva is retiring or he's done with football?
I don't know if he'll retire. What I do believe is he's done in Pittsburgh. They don't have the cap. He's a declining player. I could see him retiring because he is a declining player. It didn't look like Villanueva when he first came into the league. That was a guy, even after he got his contract, that was a guy that every play he took it to the defense. He was the guy that was the aggressor, not the one being preyed upon. He's not doing that anymore, and he just looks like he's done. So it wouldn't surprise me if he retires, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he goes elsewhere in free agency. So I just don't expect him to be with the Steelers next year.
What about Banner as well? He was injured in the first game of the season, and I know that the Steelers were high on him. It seemed like his exit interview went well. Do you think there's going to be an opportunity for Steelers fans to see more from him?
I think that's likely. It wouldn't surprise me. He's my favorite to be a starter across from Chooks next year. I mean, we'll get into the tackles in the draft. I mean, it's a deep tackle draft, but Zach Banner has the inside move right now. He was pretty good against the Giants when he did play. And then in 2019, I thought he played well too. He's kind of one of those guys that the Steelers need on the O-line, right? One of those big, strong road graders that can just clear holes. I thought they really missed him in that manner. He just clears guys out. He's super strong, and he works really well on his body. He looks more agile than he ever did before in his career, college or NFL. So he definitely has an opportunity to get that starting job back. Wouldn't surprise me at all if our two starting opening day tackles are Chooks and Banner, with whichever one plays left tackle, whichever one plays right tackle. Just depends on who's comfortable.
And with Sarrett, his departure, do you think it was just due to not developing players or just the overall struggle? I mean, he was dealing with an aging offensive line, so I wasn't sure what went on there.
So two things. One, it was the play of the line, I think. Although the young guys, it seemed like the young guys played well. Derwin Gray played well. Kevin Dotson played well. Chooks did play well for the most part. Banner played well. I thought that he did a fine job of developing guys. I thought, you can't really blame the aging on him. I think more so because Munchak was the run game coordinator. I think Sarrett took over those duties. The run game was a disaster, like schematically. It wasn't just a disaster blocking. It wasn't just a disaster with running backs vision. The schematics were just awful. I mean, it was, they never did anything off the jet sweep. Like if it was a jet motion and here comes Claypool, it's a run. Like, it's a run. Or if it's 12 personnel, if there's two tight ends and Ebron's in line, it's a run. Like it was so predictable. And I hate throwing that out because predictable. I think, there was a lot of predictability in this offense, but I think that gets overused a lot. But the running game just did nothing. Like, no one was fooled. They figured it out by week 6, and that's why you saw the Matt Canada stuff just go out the window because they didn't know what to do off it. And Shaun Sarrett never did anything in the running game to spice it up, and I think that was his ultimate undoing. The run game was really what put him under the barrel.
We talked a little bit about it, the running attack, and the first 6 weeks, the rushing attack wasn't great, but it was certainly something that could be used later in the season. They started off with 5 solo 100-yard rushers, and of course, it went all downhill from Tennessee on. They really only had one game in which they, as a team, rushed for over 100 yards. Going to be talks about a new running back here. And, of course, James Conner is one of those free agents. Do you think that the Steelers' run game should just be retrofitted again? Like, should they just basically clean house from there? I'm pretty sure Samuels is gone. Snell, I don't know if there's really much more we could see out of him. There wasn't a lot for really the one guy that I could see staying without a doubt is McFarland Jr.
Everything needs cleaned out. Like, if it were up to me, I would clear house on the O-line. Like, I would get rid of Pouncey I would get rid of DeCastro. I'd get rid of Villanueva and Filer. I just think they need to get young. They need to redevelop this with a purpose. You're bringing in a new OC, so if you want to change schemes, you can tailor that with a new O-line, right? Like, that makes sense to me. As far as the running backs, man, they were just bad this year. Not to their own fault. There wasn't a lot of holes. I mean, there was not. Make no mistake, the blocking up front was atrocious. But, there were opportunities when there were holes. And Conner, I've always said this, I really like James Conner. I think he's a pretty good all-around back, but he's just never had great vision. That's just something James Conner's just never had. And that's kind of what separates Conner from, the elite backs in the league. Like, he's a good back. He's not a great back. And that's kind of always what's held James Conner back. For Benny Snell, he's just a guy. Literally, he's just a guy. Hard runner. He's quick, but he's not really explosive. He's not going to break a ton of tackles. Again, he too doesn't have great vision. Anthony McFarland, super explosive, can make guys miss, doesn't have vision. Jalen Samuels, just a guy, doesn't have vision. There's not a single back in this room that has good vision. They need to find a back that needs vision, that has vision. But yeah, cleaning house in the running game makes a lot of sense to me because it was so bad. Just build it from the ground up with a few guys, Kevin Dawson, Zach Banner, Juju Smith-Schuster, keep those guys.
And then with the receivers, what is your assessment on them? They kind of had an up and down season, I thought. I mean, overall they did pretty good, but for a stretch there, they had a big lot of issues with drop passes.
I thought they were good. It's a very talented unit, right? I mean, Juju, for all of his antics off the field, regardless of how you view him, he's a talented football player on the field. He was just misused this year. Juju should not be running 5-yard drags all year. Like, he's a down the field threat over the middle of the field. And they finally found that out at the end of the year when he went nuclear in the playoff game and against Indianapolis. That's kind of where he should have been used all year. He just wasn't. So I like him. Deontay Johnson he's a step away from being a star. Like, he's right there. So is Claypool. James Washington, super solid. Good wide receiver 3. Struggles versus press, but can make really tough catches. Doesn't run the crispest routes. But again, James Washington is going to catch the football anytime it's thrown at him. Like, he is that dude. And he gets after in blocking. Claypool's going to be a great deep threat. He's a freak athlete. Again, doesn't run great routes, struggles versus press, improving on that over the year. Deontay Johnson, the only negative he has, literally, the only negative is that he can't catch the football. Led the league in drops by astronomical margin. But, like, I keep saying this. I think it's more important to be able to separate, right? Like, can you find guys that separate as easily as Deontay Johnson very often? I don't think there's a corner that matched up with him this year. Like, he burnt Marlon Humphrey. He burnt Jimmy Smith. He burnt Tre'Davious White. He burnt William Jackson III. He burnt Denzel Ward. I mean, this was not like an easy gauntlet of DBs he faced this year. And he cooked every single one of them. The issue was he couldn't catch the football. If he ever cleans that up, he's a number 1 wide receiver and the guy that, Ben feeds it to. And then Ray McCloud probably shouldn't be used on offense, although I do like him as a returner. I know he had a little rough patch there where he was dancing, but at the end of the year, the final 3 games, he really started to look like the old Ray McCloud. So I like him as a returner. But again, it wouldn't surprise me, especially since Juju's contract situation, if they draft another receiver.
Let's talk about Juju Smith-Schuster. Of course, yes, his contract is up, but he's connected with Ben. And the report with Mike Garofalo before we started recording basically said Ben wants Juju with him. And I think that honestly, even if it's potentially like a franchise tag situation or something like that, they have a lot of choices with that. He could be a candidate for that in a way. That could be the bridge year the Steelers use. And I think that they really should try to give this guy a solid contract, because as I looked in a video, he was 9th in catch rate. And also in true catch rate, meaning that the ball is going to him and he has the opportunity to either catch it, drop it, or the defender has the opportunity to make a defense or intercept it himself. He was 6th. This guy can do his job. Question is, do the Steelers realize that, and will another team try to give him a contract that's just way out of the Steelers' price range?
Yeah, so there's a few things here, right? Cap situation. The Steelers are, in the best case scenario, when the cap is flat. I'm assuming that's what's going to be. I don't think they want to lose money on the cap. The Steelers are 10 over, so they're 10 million over the cap. So how do you reconcile that? Okay. Restructuring guys like Hayward to it, you can still do that. That's kind of what they've done in the years past. You can extend Ben if you want to do that. You can extend Steven Nelson. There's a few guys you can extend. You can also make a few cuts. Guys like Derek Watt. That we don't have to talk about the Derek Watt signing. He turned out to be a disappointment, unfortunately. You can cut guys like, one of the tight ends I think is going to be cut, whether that's Ebron or McDonald. I think it's going to be McDonald. The tough cut that I could see potentially happening this offseason would be Joe Hayden. I've talked about that. They have Hilton and Sutton up on contract. They want to keep the young guys. Hayden is a very good corner still, but he's kicking that threshold where, we've seen corners that are elite one year and then the next year they just fall off a cliff because they're old. And corner just has so much variance. I don't know what they're going to do with Hayden this year. Again, the O-line, if Pouncey retires, that's another way they can clear it up. There's a lot of ways. Vince Williams is another guy, but I think they'll keep Vince. He's a core locker room guy. So there's a few ways they can clear that up. But I don't think they're likely to do it. The Steelers are typically pretty conservative. They like to keep their guys on. And with the way they draft receivers, right, it's kind of tough for me to see them re-signing Juju. I mean, the last guy they gave a big contract was AB at receiver. And before that, it was Hines Ward. So is Juju going to be that guy? I don't know. It strikes me that Deontay might be that guy, Deontay and Claypool, but I can't rule it out that they do a 1-year extension. It just depends where Juju wants to go in terms of his market value. He's only 24. So if he really wants to come back, he could take a 1-year, $12 million-ish deal, even though his market value is probably around 17 or so mil, to come back with Ben. And then next year hit the market at 24 or 25, I believe, actually, and still get a king's ransom, especially if he has a big year. I don't know. It's tough cap wise, but I would like Juju back. If they can get him back, I'll take him back. But he's just a tough fit under the cap, especially when they have so many guys and you don't know how they're going to prioritize him, Hilton, Sutton, Alu. Dupree's good as gone, so I don't really mention him, but maybe they do want Filer or Villanueva back. I don't know. It's going to be weird to see how this offseason plays out. I don't know how they're going to prioritize it.
Now the defensive line, Tyson Alulu, Cam Hayward, and Stephon Tuitt played really well this year. Tuitt had a career-high 11 sacks, and Hayward was named to his second All-Pro team. What issues did you see down the stretch against Cleveland in the playoff game as the defense just continued to struggle to stop the run? Really, they had a couple games that I kind of had like a warning signal in my head personally. And then just the most shocking thing ever, no sacks, but above all, no quarterback hits.
That one still doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, Cleveland has a really good O-line, but they're not that good. They might be a top 5 unit in the league, but the Steelers have arguably the best D-line there, right?
They had a 4th-string tackle that Mayfield literally just introduced to him, I think sometime either before the game, halftime, or at the end of the game. I can't remember, but even Mayfield didn't really know this guy, and he came in there and just showed out.
He looked really good. Michael Dunn, hats off to that kid. He stepped in as a fourth string guard. He played really well against Cam Hayward, but I don't know how you can reconcile that. First of all, Tuitt he kind of went ghost after like week 8. He got COVID there. I don't know if that has an effect. We know that there are effects with COVID. Guys like Myles Garrett have talked about it, that some guys have just not recovered for a while. Maybe that's what was up with Tuitt. I don't know, but when he came back from the COVID list, he didn't play at the high level he was at the beginning of the year. Still play at a very high level, but he was getting washed in the run game more. Alu never looked fully healthy after the knee injury. He got washed more. TJ Watt was phenomenal. Whatever the reason, they just doubled TJ Watt they triple teamed him at times in that playoff game because they didn't have to worry on the other side when Highsmith got hurt. So there's a few reasons why the run defense kind of fell off. One, again, Alu and Tuitt didn't look 100%. Two, the linebackers were a musical chair shuffle. Once they lost Devin Bush and then Spillane got hurt. Then Vince went out on COVID. It was a wreck. Then, Marcus Allen got hurt too and was dinged. UG3 was in and out of the lineup. The only stable guy was Avery Williamson. It was just a mess. And Spillane's not a phenomenal run defender by any means. The run defense kind of just fell off after teams started realizing that they could attack the second level of the Steelers defense because the linebackers didn't have it. And you would have the off play where, TJ would make a great play. One of the D linemen would come here, make a great play, but they could just blow them off the ball with double teams and stuff like that. And then there's also the fact, as good as Alex Highsmith played, he's just not Bud Dupree. He's not the run defender Bud Dupree was. Bud Dupree was one of the best edge defending run stoppers in the NFL. Highsmith will get to a level that's elite probably because he showed a lot of flashes that were elite, but he's not there yet. So it was inexperience, injuries, and kind of just the deal that kind of happened there. But I have no concerns. I think the D-line will be really good next year.
Yeah, let me ask you one question. I mentioned this in our final recap of the Browns game. My idea was that, especially with Bud out and TJ, typically he's doubled. Wouldn't it have worked just to flip the side he's on? I know he typically attacks, I believe, from the left, but just throwing him out on the right, just giving it a different look and making the offensive line, at least before snap, have to think a little bit would have helped him. Because that was just shocking how it was. We all know how TJ Watt has been this year. It's like he gets held with arm triangles, all types of MMA moves by offensive linemen just to not let him get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously if you put him on one side, they're just going to slide the double team over and they're just going to motion the guy over, right? Or if it's a double team in the O-line, they're just going to double team him on the other side. But here's where I actually think that's valid. Mike Hilton, because when you overload a side with Mike Hilton, there's a reason you do that. The issue is they almost never overload the right side of that line. It's almost always towards either who was Bud Dupree or Alex Highsmith. And it feels like he only blitzes off that left side of the O-line. So to me, that's where it could have made a big difference. Because if you can't double team TJ because here comes Mike Hilton, or if you want to do it and Mike Hilton's going to come through and get a sack, that's where I thought they could do it more. They did a little bit. They did a little bit in the playoff game. They sent Minkah Fitzpatrick out of all people. I mean, they never send Minkah Fitzpatrick on blitzes. They sent him twice in the playoff game. They tried giving them different looks. I think it's a valid point when you consider kind of what you can do with a guy like Mike Hilton, and they never tried it. I don't know why Mike Tomlin and Keith Butler never thought, let me put Hilton and Watt on the same side. That is a little bit confusing.
And then going to the linebackers, as we mentioned, TJ Watt had an unbelievable year with leading the league in sacks with 15, and he's the odds-on favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. Dupree had a great season as well up until he suffered a season-ending ACL tear in Week 12 against the Ravens. Highsmith filled in and did pretty well. At inside linebacker, Devin Bush was another big loss in Week 6 to also an ACL injury. It was a big blow. And Robert Spillane and Avery Williamson, they did a pretty decent job in there. But Spillane was really exposed against the Browns in pass coverage, and they really missed Devin Bush in that game. And as you mentioned in the run game, when I was watching the All-22 film, Wyatt Teller was doing an amazing job getting to the second level, and same thing with their center Trotter. I saw at times they had guys on the ground just once they got to the second level. But what do you think about Devin Bush? Like, how big of a loss was he down that stretch run?
Huge, massive. Because it kind of allows them to do things that you wouldn't do as a defensive coordinator, like put a linebacker on a receiver. Like Devin Bush, we kind of don't bat an eye when, you see Devin Bush on Jarvis Landry because he's got the clamps on him. He's an elite coverage linebacker. He kind of allows them to do that. And then what he does is he allows Vince Williams to be Vince Williams because he knows Devin Bush is so fast, such a ridiculous athlete, regardless of what he does. Devin Bush has got him on backup because he can range over to the other side like a freak and make that tackle. And I thought they missed his sideline to sideline speed a lot. And by virtue of him being out, they missed Vince Williams just shooting gaps like a madman a lot because I think it was through 6-7 weeks, Vince Williams was on a record-setting pace for tackles for loss. And that was because Devin Bush allowed him to just be crazy out there. And we didn't see that Vince Williams really ever after that. And it's because they had to dial it back. They ran a lot more simple coverages because Devin Bush allows them to do a lot more disguising, kind of pattern matching underneath. He's a huge loss. When he gets back, his return's going to be huge. I know they're losing, they'll lose Dupree. They'll probably lose a few more guys, but the return of Devin Bush is going to be massive. And I think you saw that. You saw what value he brings, what a good player he is. He was probably worth trading up to number 10 for at the very least.
And what do you think about Keith Butler or Mike Tomlin? I know there's kind of been mixed reports about who was calling the players or whatever, but I know Warren Sharp on Twitter was just going off about how it was a similar situation there with Jarvis Landry on Spillane to a couple of years ago when Keenan Allen was on John Bostic and they had a key reception there on third down.
They don't fix that. They haven't fixed that. I've been talking to some other Steelers writers about it. And so I went back through the years to kind of watch how long has this been a problem. It's been a problem since 2008, like legitimately, like LeBeau time. Like the Patriots were the first one to expose it in 2008, and then they just never fixed it. Like that's why the Patriots blew them out every time. They just attacked the linebacker. They just spread them out of 12 or 13 personnel, put their receiver in that most inside spot, and they get up on a linebacker. And they just have never fixed it. They've never fixed it in over a decade under Tomlin. So I can't say it's going to be fixed next year. I mean, there are fixes to it. It's not easy to fix at all. So there's one thing you can do. It's called fine skill, where, you just have the corners track. You just essentially have the corners shadow the receivers wherever they go. And then, you flip the linebacker out to the running back who's on the outside because that's what they do, or they'll be on a tight end, something like that. Or you can send blitzes. Instead of, you can check to that linebacker that is on, say, Spillane's on Jarvis Landry. Okay, we don't want that matchup. We're going to have Minkah Fitzpatrick come down, cover Landry, and Spillane's going to go. And that's going to be our check. And that gets you 5-man rush. That gets you a DB on a wide receiver. That gives you a good matchup. There are ways they can do it. But they haven't done it. Again, they haven't done it in a decade. So I don't know what they're going to do. As for Butler, I don't really mind him staying on. I still don't know the dynamics in there. If he's only a DC in name only, and Tomlin's been calling the plays all year, I don't know. Keith Butler might just be an outside linebackers coach with the defensive coordinator title, and he's a darn good outside linebackers coach. So if that's the case, it makes sense to keep him on. And then the real problem is Mike Tomlin, and he needs to change it. So I don't know. It's something that hasn't been fixed in a very long time.
there's one thing you mentioned it with Bud potentially not being gone, and the reason why I said with Juju, there's a possibility he gets that franchise tag back. But of course, on defense, there's a lot of guys that could be eligible for that. Mike Hilton's another guy, and if the Steelers decide to do it, and if Bud wants to prove himself for another year after this injury, he could potentially get tagged a second time. The question is, like, who would the Steelers tag defensively, in your opinion?
It's tough for a tag this year. Just straight up. Like, I don't know if they're going to use a franchise tag. Because again, that cap is tough. Luckily, they have Omar Khan to work some magic. If you tag anyone, because Bud Dupree is going to get that tag is going to be upwards, I think, $25 million this year. Like, it's going to be a ridiculous number, and they just can't afford it. So if you tag anyone defensively, got to be Mike Hilton. He's just too valuable. He's a blitzer. He's a safety. He's a dime backer. He's a slot corner. He's also kind of a linebacker. He kind of does everything. Maybe not the greatest cover guy, but it's Mike Hilton for sure. No questions asked.
All right, so let's talk about the rest of that secondary. And for the most part, at one point, this was one of the higher takeaway secondaries in the league. But of course, towards the end, teams start figuring out with the combination of injuries and stuff like that, and some bad angles, notably in the last two Browns games, that really caused a little bit of concern. So I want to get your thoughts on the secondary, because again, they gave up some big plays, but for the most part, they were solid.
Yeah. So the secondary, Minkah Fitzpatrick, all pro, phenomenal player. Even though there's some trouble with his tackling, I think he's fine. Joe Hayden, again, I think he makes the wheels turn on this operation. He kind of just allows them flexibility on the back end to run a lot of different coverages, and they went really vanilla in the last 2 weeks when Hayden was out. If they have him, I think they have a much better shot of winning that game against Cleveland. Even with the awful start, I think they can get a lot more momentum going in that second half, maybe get a turnover, maybe get a few more stops. Hayden just kind of changes how they play defensively. Steven Nelson, solid. Sutton, really good. I really want him back. He's super versatile, super smart, does like everything that you ask him to do. Can play on the outside, in the slot, at safety. You want him back. I've obviously avoided talking about Terrell Edmonds until the last moment. I don't think he's bad. I think he's fine. He's not a great tackler still, although he improved there this year. But he's a versatile guy too, so you can play him in the slot, play him on tight ends. He was really good against tight ends. One of the best safeties in man coverage against tight ends this year. And that's kind of why you never saw the Steelers getting burnt by tight ends like they have in the past. He was the guy doing it. So I like Terrell Edmonds. He's not going to be a superstar, but he's a solid player. He's grown into that. And I think they should pick up his fifth-year option. Aside from all the bad angles and the missed tackles and all that, he has his lows, but I think he had a solid year this year. And then outside of that, young guys. Justin Lane getting leapfrogged by James Pierre is not good, but I like what we saw out of Pierre. Limited snaps, that nice pass breakup in the playoff game. I think Pierre might be something. He's someone to watch out for in the future, especially, again, if someone like Sutton walks or if Hayden gets cut. You never know what can happen there. I think that you have a guy like Pierre there that's really someone to watch to possibly be a starter in the future.
You'll talk a little bit of breaking news here. According to Ian Rappaport, the Steelers are expected to promote quarterbacks coach Matt Canada to offense coordinator. Sources tell him and Tom Pelissero. Creative mind, originally from the college game, Rappaport says Canada also interviewed with the Dolphins, but now he's supposed to stay in Pittsburgh, I guess. So there you have it there from Ian Rappaport. I guess Canada is supposed to be the new offense coordinator.
Wow. Okay.
That basically just took away our entire talk about who should be the offensive coordinator. So I guess Steel Valley's not getting representation on the Steelers for the first time since Charlie Batts. But hey, that's just how it is. I mean, I hope that they go out and get another quarterbacks coach, because I think you can have situations where you have guys doing two jobs, especially on a team with the Steelers that basically, if you're the offensive coordinator, you're basically the offensive head coach of this team. Mike Tomlin is going to call the defensive plays there. And so basically everything, the offense, it's an intriguing job because effectively you shape the entire offense. So it's going to be interesting to see what Canada did. He's familiar being the offensive coordinator in Heinz Field with the Panthers, and that was the highest scoring offense they ever had with James Conner and Nathan freaking Peterman at quarterback. So, hey, you never know.
This is interesting because Canada, again, I cited the history. 4 out of 5 internal candidates make it 5 out of 6 under Kevin Colbert. Canada is truly a shakeup. Like, this is not a guy that's going to keep, the Haley Fichtner scheme. He is a completely different minded coach. A lot of motion. We know the motion, obviously. The RPOs, the play action. Like, this is going to be interesting because these are historically things Ben doesn't like. It's going to be really interesting to see how Ben works with Canada to try to get down things like play action and things like, working with motion. That's just stuff Ben isn't super comfortable with. Interested to see if Ben can work through an offseason with Canada and, maybe this offense has a lot of things we've never seen before and work at a high level.
Was Canada a part of, I know we're talking about defense, but now this is breaking news. We have to talk this. Was Canada more a part of some of this jet sweep stuff? I know that Randy was a little capable with it with the disaster that was the Wildcat with Jalen Samuels 2 years ago. It seemed like a new wrinkle because it didn't seem like the Steelers would do that. If anything, I thought they were going to pull off the old school wide receiver reverse from like 2005.
Yeah, no, he was the architect of that. All that motion stuff you saw early in the year, that was Canada. And then late in the year, the attempted PA stuff and the RPOs that are now rampant throughout this offense, that's him. Ben got comfortable with his RPOs at the end of the year. Never got comfortable with play action. He just doesn't like turning his back to the defense. But, I'm interested to see kind of if the Steelers fully integrate this Canada scheme. I'm interested to see how they fit it to Ben. Because Matt Canada's scheme needs a mobile quarterback. Ben's not a mobile quarterback anymore. And you're not going to put him rolling out of the pocket anymore, quite honestly. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how they tailor this to Big Ben. But yeah, he's going to give you those jet sweeps, the different looks. This is going to be a crazy offense to watch next year. It's going to be really different. I know it's an internal hire, but this is a shakeup. This is a schematic shakeup.
Now that we're firmly in talks with this, of course, on the draft order, at least for the Steelers, is potentially drafting the future franchise quarterback. And of course, that's going to be a guy that needs to be mobile, needs to throw on the run. I still don't think the Steelers will draft a quarterback right now. I think they'll at least try to see if they could sprinkle in Rudolph, but that's also dependent on if Ben wants to come back, and that's still the question. So do you think that the Steelers will be drafting their quarterback of the future?
Not this year. I don't think, unless they trade up. Like, I don't, because I don't think they're going to be interested in a dude like Kyle Trask or Mac Jones. Trey Lance is kind of the guy I think fits well with Canada. That'd be a really fun fit. He's the mobile guy, strong arm, works play action a ton. He's super familiar with a scheme like this, but I don't see them taking a quarterback. The value's just not there. It's a pretty weak class outside of the top 4. It's pretty much the top 4, Mac Jones, then Kyle Trask, and then everyone else, since Desmond Ridder went back to school.
That I heard that mentioned, there was another guy that I was thinking of for the Steelers originally, and you mentioned Trask, it was Sam Ehlinger. But from what I've heard, he's not exactly the best quarterback throwing on the run out there. We'll see what he can do in the Senior Bowl, because that's going to be the biggest outlier, because potentially with no combine, and even with that, that's still a little bit shaky at times to see if a quarterback could throw on the run with pressure.
And Nick, do you think they made this move to hire Matt Canada because he was in the organization and to like keep Roethlisberger happy, I guess?
I think they just like that organizational stability. I don't know if it's. I don't think it's to make Ben happy because Matt. I've said this before on Twitter. Like Matt Canada and Ben, their schemes are like clashing, right? Like Ben has his scheme, which is like his no huddle, 3 wide receivers or 5 wide receivers, whatever he does. Let's spread the defense out. Let me take show, right? Like it's a completely different offense from this motion heavy play action rollout type game. Like Matt Canada is a spread offense. Ben runs more of a West Coast type deal where he tries to get the ball out quick or push the ball down the field. So it's going to be interesting because Ben's not going to want to give up his offense. Like he likes his offense. He has his core ways of playing. He's been in the league for 16 years now. This will be what 17th year actually, I think. This will be in 2021. It's going to be different for Ben. He's going to have to learn new tricks at the age of 39. And to me, this is Ben signaling he's willing to do anything to win a Super Bowl, even learn new stuff, even if it's 1 year. So I don't think it's to appease Ben. I think it's to try and get a schematic change here and try to overhaul how this offense looks.
To finish up on 2020, what players surprised you the most in 2020, and who, in your opinion, was the biggest disappointment?
So to me, the biggest surprise, that's a tough one. There were a few surprises, but I'm going to go Kevin Dotson. I thought he would be good. I didn't think he'd be this good. He was legitimately a phenomenal football player. Like if he played a full year, he could have been a Pro Bowler. He moved guys. He gave up no ground in pass pro. He's filthy. He's exactly what this team needs. I thought he was phenomenal this year. Biggest disappointment that I gotta go with David DeCastro. He fell off a cliff. Like there was nothing that signaled he would fall off a cliff. He still was very good last year, and then he got beat repeatedly this year. There was nothing he could do to get movement up front. And yeah, he's a super smart guy still. He takes care of his job. He communicates effectively. He doesn't move as well as he used to. He gets pushed back into Ben's lap. So it was DeCastro for me. Both offensive linemen. That O-line was just – I think the O-line as a whole was pretty disappointing aside from Dotson and Chuk's core for.
The Steelers draft needs, as listed by Chris, are quarterback, offensive line, running back, and inside linebacker. And a couple guys that he said was pretty good was Alex Leatherwood, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Najee Harris, which has been almost nationally connected to the Steelers' first pick, and also running back Travis Etienne out of Clemson is another name that we've seen linked to the Steelers. Who would you like on the Steelers from the draft?
My ideal realistic pick is Alex Leatherwood. I want that again. I want to get that O-line addressed. So if it has to be a tackle, it does. And I think Leatherwood is the kind of guy they need. He's from Bama. He's got that really nasty ability to just move dudes. He's a people mover. He and Dotson would fit like perfectly at left guard and left tackle. Like that, those two would combo block guys into the sun. I really like what he does. He can also play guard. So if they have a hole there, thanks to injury, you could slide Leatherwood inside and then play Banner or Chooks or whoever you want on the outside. So I really like that positional flexibility. He's just a super solid football player. Good feet, good hands, strong hands at that. He really does pack a punch when he strikes. It's not a flashy pick. Offensive linemen are never flashy picks, but they can also be the necessary picks. And you need, if you want Ben to be successful next year, regardless of, Canada, whoever, that O-line needs to be at the top of its game.
And I want to mention this on Twitter. You had an interesting round one scenario. You told people Leatherwood, Slater, Darrisaw, and Etienne are off the board. And the top players on the board were Samuel Cosmi, offensive tackle from Texas, Najee Harris, Trayvon Moig, a safety from TCU, Jalen Mayfield, offensive tackle, Michigan, and Christian Barrymore and Chris O'Clave, a wide receiver from Ohio State, round out at least the 5-6 players that you had on there. And you chose Cosme. So talk about Samuel Cosme just as like a situation that those four have been drafted.
Yeah, so Cosme, that dude is very different from Leatherwood. Leatherwood's super polished, plug and play. You get what you see, pretty much. Cosme is this super athletic guy that shouldn't move as well as he does. He's 6'7", 320, and he moves like he's 6'4", 280. I mean, he moves really well. Reaches to the second level really easily. Kind of like Chooks, if you know, big men shouldn't move as easily as Chooks does. It's kind of what you see with Cosme. He's super long, and you have a lot of upside with him. If you can develop him, you probably have an all-pro guard. He's legitimate, not all-pro guard, all-pro tack. We are not kicking that man inside. But like you probably have a guy that's your foundation for your O-line. He's got those tools. He really improved this year with his hands. He still has some technical flaws. He overextends sometimes. His hands still get wide, so he gets called for holding a little bit more than you would like. But that you kind of live with that when you see this upside. And if you get a really solid O-line coach in here anyways, you're going to develop him. So that's what Cosme brings to the table and why I really like him along the line. And you can still start him day one, but, you still have a core four and Banner. So if you don't think Cosme's ready, you just start Banner instead.
I don't know what they're going to go with the quarterback. They might go another year with Roethlisberger, but what are your thoughts on the quarterbacks in this draft class?
Yeah, so I like Trevor Lawrence, QB1, right? Pretty obvious. Justin Fields, I think all three of us agree they're not getting Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or Trevor Lawrence. Like they're not attainable. So I don't think you're going to get Trey Lance either, but I really like Trey Lance because he has that ability, that modern QB ability, that perfect fit with the Matt Canada scheme. He's a really athletic player, super good runner in the open field. He's pretty broad though, so you're going to sit him, which is why it almost works perfectly with Ben, because you can sit Ben for a year and then Trey Lance starter in 2022, but you have to trade up to get him. So he has all the natural tools. Didn't throw an interception in his freshman year of college, and he is a 1-year FCS quarterback, so the risk is there. In general, though, I think this quarterback class is pretty weak outside of those top four. Mac Jones, I like him, but I see him more as an Andy Dalton type guy. He's accurate, he's smart, he does a little bit outside the pocket, but he's not got a great arm. He's not going to elevate guys around him. He needs the perfect. He needs the perfect team around him. Kind of when that 2016 Bengals team was, they had a great surrounding environment around Dalton, and he was an MVP candidate. It's kind of what you need for Mac Jones. Kyle Trask, he's SEC Mason Rudolph. Pretty much, you don't need another Mason Rudolph. I'll just leave it at that. He's limited, doesn't do much outside the pocket. He'll be a good backup, but that's kind of how I see Rudolph too. And I just don't think they need another guy like that. Outside of that, there's really not much. Ehlinger is interesting. But does he have the NFL traits? I'm not sure. Davis Mills is interesting. Surprise declaration. Throws a really pretty pass. He's mobile too. I haven't studied him enough yet, but I've heard some buzz about him. So maybe he enters the conversation as the game changer. But outside of that, there's not a lot of guys here. There's guys like Felipe Franks, Kellen Mond, Jamie Newman. I know some people like. I don't like Newman. There's just not a lot of guys I like. I don't know. I think they should stray away from quarterback.
And another thing is running back. I know that, of course, again, Najee Harris is the guy out there, but there are guys later. If they finally want to get an Ohio State running back, Trey Sermon is a guy for them potentially in the third round.
I like Trey Sermon. Yeah, I think Trey Sermon makes sense. He feels like a Steelers back. He gives them a guy with solid vision and the ability to create. I don't think is he going to be a lead back? I don't know. But if Anthony McFarland takes that next step, which I think all of us hope he does because I think he can, him and Sermon would be a very, very nice duo. That's kind of the thing about Sermon. He's he shouldn't stay up as easily as he does. He just breaks tackles really easily. Arm tackles aren't going to bring him down. He runs super tough, always falling forward. He's not a super well-rounded back, so he's not a great receiver. But I do like Sermon specifically. There's a few other backs. Javonte Williams I've thrown around a lot. Michael Carter. Those two UNC guys are two guys to watch. But Sermon is the leading candidate for sure in round 3.
Sleeper picks for the Steelers. I know that tight end is not necessarily on the Steelers' draft needs. If they want, they still have a choice between one of Ebron or McDonald, but ideally they'll probably draft a tight end just to have like a body out there. And of course, as you know, with wide receivers, it depends on what Juju wants to do and how they can acquire that deal around him. But of course, there was one guy, at least from Florida, that I seen in like a tweet somewhere that had like pretty nice moves. I can't remember his name. I think he did declare.
Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
That's a pick that would fit the Matt Canada offense about as good as you could imagine. Kadarius Toney, I don't know how to describe him because he's like Dante Hall, I guess would be my best comp. There are a few Percy Harvin comparisons there too. But I don't think it's apt. He's a slot receiver, which makes sense. If Juju leaves, they need a slot receiver, but he's a speedy slot receiver. So he'll give you the deep threat, but he'll also be able to take those jet sweeps and take them to the house. Super elusive. He's a highlight reel. You'd have to take him in round 1. Do you want to take a receiver / running back, pretty much is what they would use him as in that kind of scheme? I mean, the fit makes so much sense. It really does. That's up to them. I mean, I could see it happening if, the board falls right. That meaning tackles are gone. Maybe, Najee is out off the table. If that happens, I find that as an interesting fit. A sleeper pick I will throw out because I do kind of agree. Receiver is a possible pick, right? Round 2, Amari Rodgers from Clemson. He is literally Deebo Samuel. Perfect fit for the Matt Canada scheme. Again, get those jet sweeps, bubble screens, the underneath stuff. I think they need another guy like Deontay Johnson in this offense. They need another yak guy. You just can't feed that to Deontay all the time. Amari Rodgers would be that. So that's a sleeper pick. Super sleeper pick round 1 if he falls. I don't think he will, but I've talked about this before. Dream scenario, we get Kyle Pitts. Yeah. Dream scenario.
I want an elite tight end again because Ben and Heath was just like a match made in heaven. In terms of tight ends, we've had some really good guys, but nothing that would basically make you go, wow.
If Kyle Pitts makes it to 24, there's no way you pass him up. You just can't do it. We know Ben loves having, that guy. Like, he wants a guy, right? Like, he wants the one guy he can go to. Before, it was Hines Ward. Then it was Santonio. Then it was Mike Wallace. Then it was for so many years, it was AB. I don't think he really had that guy last year where he could throw it to and say, I trust you in the big time. And, maybe that could be Juju eventually. I think it could be Deontay eventually if he can catch it, but Kyle Pitts could be that guy.
Yeah, it's been years where they had a solid tight end. Really, they haven't replaced Heath Miller really yet since he retired after the 2015 season. So, Kyle Pitts would be a great pick there. Also, going back to the quarterbacks, so you think what's going to happen is that they're going to ride it out this year with Roethlisberger and Rudolph, and then 2022 is going to be when they draft a quarterback?
That's the feeling I get. I think that's, either they do that or if, 2022, the preliminary viewings of it that I've seen is a pretty good class. There's a few guys there at the top. Again, the Steelers with Ben in that defense aren't going to be bad. Like, they might be mediocre. They might go 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. That can only get you so high. You're not going to be in the top 10. So it's going to be weird as to how they figure out this quarterback situation. If they draft a quarterback, I don't know. Maybe Ben retires next year. They have a ton of cap space. Maybe they trade for Stafford next year. Maybe if he becomes a free agent and the Jets give up on him, maybe they go out and sign Darnold. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe, if Dak gets the franchise tag and he hits the market next year, maybe they make an all-out blitz at Dak Prescott. There's so many variables. But, yeah, that's my preliminary thoughts. You ride this year with Ben, one last ride, give him one last shot, because what else can you do? And then next year, in 2022, you get the quarterback.
Yeah, yesterday I wrote like a hypothetical situation where the Steelers forced Roethlisberger to retire. Because, they did it to Paul Mall, so it's like it's not really, out of the stretch there. But if they were to do that, ride it with Rudolph and, potentially a free agent quarterback, and then go 6-10 like they did in 2003, which led them to get Roethlisberger. But, I know, like you mentioned, with Roethlisberger in that defense, like they'll go 8-8, so like they'll have like a mid-round pick or something like that, which really doesn't really guarantee. You need like at least like a top 10, maybe top 12 pick to get like a really good quarterback sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they become candidates to trade up. You don't know. They could. They've done it before. They've shown an aggressiveness in recent years. Kevin Colbert has, to trade up and trade their first round pick. Minka. Hey, it's worked out. Bush was good. Minka was good. Maybe that's what they got to do to get their quarterback. Maybe they got to trade up. I just don't, with this defense, even if they have a bad quarterback, we saw this. That defense last year literally carried them to 8-8, right? With Duck and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. So even if they have a crappy quarterback, I don't know, say Ben did retire this year and they signed, Jameis Winston. Would that team go any worse than maybe 7-9? Because I know Jameis is a turnover factory, but he's also this dude that makes wild throws and can still put up 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and like 4 picks. Ben playoff game Ben was pretty much how a 39-year-old Jameis Winston is going to look like. And I don't know, like you don't know with the quarterback situation. It's such a tough thing to figure out. But I tend to think your best opportunity is to go and trade up for a quarterback if you're not bad enough. And you know what? If you are that middling team and you do get an opportunity to get a guy like Stafford, you get it. Like you do get him because that can extend your window with the defense.
Yeah, just tell people where they can see your stuff and Twitter, anything else like that.
Yeah, so you guys can find me at Farabaugh FB, FARABAUGHFB. Read my Steelers stuff at Steelers Now. We'll be doing some Steelers draft stuff and then other draft stuff I do, Pro Football Network. If you want to do some sims, I post a lot of mock draft sims on Twitter. That's where I do them. Pro Football Network, we have a great mock draft sim, update our rankings weekly. So you can find all my stuff there.
All right, that's Nick Farabaugh, Steelers writer for Pittsburgh Sports Now and other places on the internet. Be sure to find his work there. Thanks for coming on the show. All right, Chris, so what's your favorite memory of the 2020 season? I'm going to say that first half against the Titans, where it had me and my parents thinking, wow, this is going to be the most dominant Steelers team ever. Yeah, we certainly got punched straight in the mouth for that thought.
Yeah, that was a fun moment. That 3-game stretch really there when they crushed the Browns. They beat the Titans when the last second missed field goal there. And then they came back to beat the Ravens. That was also an exciting game also. And then the second half, heroic performance by Ben to come back and beat the Colts there in Week 16 was also a great moment.
What are you excited about for the offseason, at least for us? Of course, we have a ton of things. That's going to be our first foray into draft coverage, covering the Pro Football Hall of Fame, of course, covering it outside of Twitter for us. That's the one big thing. There's so much there. Of course, we still have so much more to do this season, and it's going to be exciting. So what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to in the upcoming weeks with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I always enjoy that with the voting process, and I think Bill Nunn's pretty much a lock to get in, and I'm hoping Alan Faneca gets in as well.
Stay tuned, guys, because who knows? We have some surprises for the Pro Football Hall of Fame if everything all works out. And that's all for us. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.